finally almost Halloween time. It's our time to shine. You know we keep it creepy on this channel all year round, baby. So it's the perfect excuse to tell you guys some of my favorite ghost stories from Wisconsin. But before we get started, do you like my sweatshirt? It was my birthday. Like it? I felt like a traitor wearing this because I was a pretty big fan of especially the original Halloween series, and I enjoyed the 2018 remake, but they lost me after last year's movie. I digress. So I thought that I would tell you guys some of my favorite ghost stories and just some creepy mysteries from Wisconsin. It's the perfect time to do it, the Halloween season, like I said. So let's keep it creepy, shall we, and talk about some spooky stuff from Wisconsin. I'm so excited. Like I said, this is our season, guys. Let's get into it. So the first place on my list has to be the Ambassador Hotel. I'm including this one. I'm sure it's a fairly haunted spot considering all the reports of people's experiences there are insane. So the Ambassador Hotel was built in the 1920s, and this is where Jeffrey Dahmer, not in the 1920s, in like the 1980s, Jeffrey Dahmer was said to have taken his first victim there, and he smuggled him out in a suitcase. It's pretty intense. It's insane. And who knows how many crimes he actually committed in that hotel. But it makes the list, and a lot of unscrupulous individuals resided in the hotel during that time. But at one time, before all of that, you know, this place was a very prestigious hotel, and it is now again. It is now a luxury hotel once again. And they don't really like talking about Jeffrey Dahmer, and I'm sure they're getting an influx and curious customers considering, like I said, the new Netflix series. So the Ambassador Hotel definitely makes number 10 just because of how insane, you know, the story is, the things that went on there, the things that place had probably seen. But I also read that there weren't any prior reports of a haunting, nothing until the homicide committed by Jeffrey Dahmer occurred. To explore just a little further, the Ambassador Hotel was built in 1928. As I said, it originally catered to the wealthier people of the Milwaukee area, and many prestigious historical figures have visited this hotel during its height, such as the Beatles and JFK, who gave a speech here during a convention. In September of 1987, Stephen Twomey went missing after having met Jeffrey Dahmer at a bar. Jeffrey Dahmer proceeded to take Stephen back to room 507 at the Ambassador Hotel, and it was here that he would drug and murder Stephen. Now, Jeffrey claims that he didn't intend to kill him, but that's what ended up happening. Now, according to staff and other individuals that have resided at the hotel, they claim to have heard two men arguing. Staff says that they'll get phone calls to the front desk quite often of people complaining over two men violently fighting in an argument in a room above or next to them. Now, take note that room 507 no longer exists, so we don't really know where or what room exactly Jeffrey Dahmer stayed in. So maids and, again, hotel staff have made reports that when they go into a room or maybe the room where Jeffrey had resided, they would make the bed, and before they could even leave the room, the bed would be a complete mess again. And then we have reports of your classic, poltergeist activity, things being thrown across the room, electronics malfunctioning. So your best bet, according to Chad Lewis, who does in-depth research on the paranormal in Wisconsin, he says to go, if you want to go experience a night in a haunted room at the Ambassador, your best bet is to just pick a different room every time you stay. But you're probably bound to run across something. And I don't know if I would really want to stay in the room where Jeffrey Dahmer did the shit that he did. So number 9 is Tabor Cemetery in Juneau, Wisconsin. Now this one I read in a few different places. Like if you Google haunted places in Wisconsin, you're going to find Tabor Cemetery on Eagle Road in Juneau, Wisconsin. Now, I've been there several times. It's only a 10-minute drive from my house, so I've got the opportunity to investigate this place multiple times. You're not allowed to be there after dark. Like, that is trespassing, so you can get in a lot of trouble if you're there after dark. But this place is said to have full-bodied apparitions. I mean, like, your camera equipment malfunctions, lights flicker, and that kind of like my light's doing right now. But weird things go on in that little cemetery, and as to why, nobody really knows. This cemetery is located kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's just out in the country. There's nothing surrounding it other than a small patch of woods, which when I was there and exploring it, I got a weird vibe. The very first time I went there, I felt weird, and I swear I saw something like duck quickly behind a gravestone. And at this point in time, I hadn't really done my research because this was just, I was in my my infancy as a ghost hunter, so I wasn't really well prepared for this place. I had just simply Googled haunted spots and went out on a whim and was, you know, being a silly teenager at that time. And so when I read up on it later, I was reading other people had the same experience of seeing like shadow figures, you know, ducking in and out behind trees and gravestones. And so I thought it was kind of weird that my experience correlated with other people's experience without me even knowing that they had that experience. And I've never really seen like a full-bodied apparition. Just, you know, it's that visual out of the corner of your eye. You see it and then you question if you even seen it. It was one of those types of situations. But I just thought it was funny that, like I said again, something that I experienced there was my very first, like, time going to a cemetery and doing a full-on investigation. I had explored a couple of abandoned houses at that point, but never really did a full ghost explore like I did that time. And that's what I had experienced. And my camera died right after that. So, very creepy, but going there recently, I wanted to share that I experienced nothing. I went there not too long ago, and I didn't really have much of a feeling of anything being there at all. Still a creepy place nonetheless, and it makes the list because a lot of people did, you know, have an experience there.
This seemingly ordinary country cemetery is home to many local legends and lore. People frequently report cold spots and breezes, seeing fully formed apparitions. Others also claim that they laid eyes upon the Holy Mother herself, the Virgin Mary. And morbidly, they say she bleeds from her hands and her arms, maybe symbolic of Jesus Christ's crucifixion. There's also claims that the individuals themselves leave this foreboding patch of hollow ground with their arms and hands bleeding. And all of this sounds a lot like the influence of Catholicism, but strangely enough, the cemetery used to have an evangelical church standing on the premises. It was built in 1807, and as far as anyone can tell, there's never been a Catholic-based faith that had practiced anywhere near this graveyard. So what are these folks seeing, and why have so many people claimed to have had the exact same experience?
The next up would be the Carson Hotel. This is number 8 on my list, and that's the Carson Hotel in Kewaunee, Wisconsin. Now, the Carson Hotel sits off of the mighty Great Lake, Michigan, and it's a pretty notorious place due to the fact that it doubled as a morgue during the Spanish flu epidemic, and a lot of activity is said to have gone on there, as well as the owner, William Karsten, his grandson passing away in the residence, as well as a maid, and I think William Karsten himself. So a lot of activity goes on in this place, and I also had the opportunity to be able to go there and investigate it for an entire night. And it was one of like the coolest experiences I ever had. And when we were there, so at this time, I also wasn't aware of much of the history at this place. This was also my very first like official ghost hunting investigation, and I joined Visually Creep TV, and at the time it was Exploring with Eric. I think he's Project Ghost now on YouTube, but I was with those two, and I made a video on this at the time, but I was totally unprepared, unequipped. I had nothing at my disposal other than myself and my little battery, like AA battery operated Kodak camera, so it was pretty rough. But the experience I had was pretty intense, because while we were staying there, we were in a room, I guess, that was directly under William Karsten's room. And while Justin and I were waiting for Eric to arrive, we heard loud, like, walking, very heavy walking. We were like, whoa, like, it was so loud and, like, almost obnoxious in how loud it was. But we didn't really think anything of it at the time. When we talked about it with the owner, we just said, like, yeah, you know, he was making a joke about the floors creaking or something. We said, like, yeah, we heard that, you know, in the room above us or whatever. And he was like, wait, what room are you in? And when we were, like, explaining it, he was like, you guys are the only ones here. Like, he was like, I thought maybe you meant your friend, but no, yeah, so that was kind of strange. And it was just so loud. It was just, and then I found out later that William Carson was a very heavy set gentleman. So now I always think that, oh my God, did we hear like the spirit of William Carson walking across that room? It gives me chills. So that place was definitely, there had to be something going on there. It was just a truly creepy hotel. An amazing owner. He was so awesome. And just a full-on creepy experience. We were able to just go through the whole night. Awesome place. Awesome story. Fantastic history. Moving on. So next up would definitely be Riverside Cemetery in Appleton, Wisconsin. Now, I think I briefly visited that place like a decade ago when I was maybe like in my early 20s, but many moons have passed and I just barely remember it. So the story of Riverside Cemetery goes that there was a woman by the name of Kate Blood, and it's her grave that bleeds blood, and she was said to have murdered her family, her husband and her children, with an axe, which didn't happen. And she was buried like kind of secluded from the other people in the cemetery, and according to the legend, it was because of her atrocious crime that she committed. She wasn't allowed to be properly buried with, you know, other people of good nature, I guess. But that isn't true. None of that happened. I guess Kate Blood was a very loving mother and wife, and she actually passed away before her husband did, so that doesn't add up, and her children outlived her as well. So the story is, though, again, that Kate Blood's grave bleeds blood, and she haunts this cemetery in Appleton, and a lot of other activity goes on there. There's also hellhounds out there, allegedly. Allegedly, there are hellhounds that come out in the night and their eyes glow red and they'll just scare the shit out of everybody in the area. Appleton has got a whole host of activity all on its own. Again, according to reports, Wisconsin has more ghosts per square feet than any other place in the world. So another place that I thought would make my list was the Milwaukee County Asylum ruins. That place was incredibly creepy when I was out there exploring, and I just could not shake that feeling of somebody watching me the entire time I was walking through the place. And even though that patch of woods, which was sanctuary woods, was so small, it still felt like you were in a completely different place. There was no way that you were in the middle of a suburb in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You know, the Wauwatosa area is just right out. It's pretty metropolitan. There's a lot of activity out there, but once you step through that threshold, you are in a completely different zone. The entire time I was there, especially in the middle of it, I know like there are always temperature shifts no matter where you're exploring in a woods, but there was just something about the Milwaukee County Asylum, I swear by it. It felt so weird and uncomfortable almost. And then when I went to the Asylum Cemetery, which was heartbreaking to see how it was separated from the Paupers Field, which there's, I guess, quite a number of graves that lay unmarked in Paupers Field as well. But the Asylum ruins was just horribly heartbreaking. You know, people are just treading through it constantly, like there's just no respect. Where the Paupers Field was fenced up, and it was just, you get this heavy sadness. And it was something I'd never experienced exploring any other place ever. But that place particularly hit my heart, and I still think about it now, and I just, you know, hope those souls find rest at some point. And of course, I think anywhere you go, any asylum is probably going to leave behind some sort of residual energy just because of all the things that probably went on there, things that we'll never know about going on there. Just sad. Very, very, very sad. So next up would be LaBelle Cemetery, another place that I've also been to. LaBelle Cemetery was very, very strange. That place creeped me out when I first explored it, but now I'm so comfortable in there. I love that cemetery. It's one of my favorite cemeteries just because of the mausoleum architecture, just stunning visuals on the lake. It's just kind of a very serene setting. And the story at LaBelle Cemetery is that a woman was grieving a broken heart and she commits suicide off of the bridge that is leading into the cemetery. She drowns herself in the lake. I guess you can see these events happen in real time. You know, you get to glimpse in the past. According to reports, people see a woman walk over to this bridge and plunge into the water after screaming an ear-piercing scream. But then people go to like help her or see what was going on, and there's nobody there. People see like lights shooting past, you know, just weird weird things like that. Hearing your name being called, whispers. I've also had people reach out to me and tell me their personal experiences. And let me tell you, every place that I've investigated, I have always had somebody message me and talk to me about what happened or their experience there. Well, LaBelle Cemetery, definitely a very, very unsettling, creepy, haunted place without a doubt. Me and Laura also caught a bunch of orbs on our camera. And now I don't pay much mind to orb activity on camera, especially when there's a lot of bugs, but this was different. This followed us on 2 different occasions, the exact same style of light. And it wasn't a reflection. It doesn't happen again after this incident, and it was a strange anomaly that we caught, and I'm convinced there's something going on at LaBelle Cemetery. Now, they also say that the grave of the girl that committed suicide, that her hands will bleed blood and she will cry blood, and a lot of people leave offerings at her grave, and I've visited that grave on a number of occasions. I've never witnessed any bleeding or anything like that, but yeah, LaBelle Cemetery is definitely a spooky one. Aslan State Park is certainly probably one of the most haunted places I've ever been to. That place, another place that'll hold a special spot in my heart because of how intense it was. This was my first investigation with Laura, like doing a paranormal investigation. This was our first time going in together, you know, as a team, and that was a pretty fun experience. And we did pick up a lot of things. Now, there is a lot to cover with Aslan State Park. I'm actually going to redo the whole video I did on there. It's getting a revamp because I can do things much better. I'll do it justice this time. But Aslan State Park was founded by some of the Mississippian people that integrated in with the local tribes, and they created their own little civilization, and they built Aslan State Park. They built these massive barricades that, you know, protected their little city, and then they just vanished. They disappear for reasons unknown, but they also left behind these pyramidal typed mounds. These mounds, they look like pyramids. And they're not sure what they were used for specifically, but there's theories behind what they could have been, you know, used for. They also found something that they found a body that they dubbed the Shell Princess, and it was the only remains to ever be found at the park. And now nobody knows whatever happened to the Shell Princess. She completely vanished. They also claimed that giants had been found in the area. Just a lot of crazy stories circle around Aslan State Park. That place is magical. I don't know how else to explain it. It's fucking magic. I caught a lot of activity. I heard footsteps running up behind me, like loud, like bump, 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 bump. You know when you run barefoot on like the ground, on like dirt, you hear that like pop, pop, pop. I can't explain it. That is what I heard in the middle of winter with all this snow covering around me. Me and Laura just out there by ourselves in the night, and there was nothing. There was just nothing. There was no animals running behind us. That place was crazy intense. Now, they also say that a lot of people have claimed to see spirits of the Native American people. They see them walking through the woods. They've claimed that they, you know, hear them like calling out or like making whistle noises. A lot of activity goes on, and it wouldn't surprise me. They also were, you know, since they were part of the mound people, they would build these mounds in the shape. If you like fly up in a helicopter or an airplane and you're looking down from an aerial perspective, you see that these mounds make the shape of a sea serpent. And I talk about these stories in another video because that sea serpent may be connected to the legends of the underwater pyramids that are in Lake Mills, which is where Aslan State Park lies. So Aslan State Park, without a doubt, one of the most haunted places in Wisconsin for sure. So number 3 would definitely have to be St. Coletta's in Jefferson, Wisconsin. Now that place was originally built as a school for children with mental disabilities. It was run by the Catholic Church.
In Jefferson, Wisconsin sits the intimidating abandoned Asylum St. Coletta. This Catholic-run facility was built in the early 20th century. This place had good intentions, as many institutions just like it started out with, but Coletta would see its fair share of despair. At one time, John F. Kennedy's sister was a resident here. Sadly, when Rosemary Kennedy was only 23, she had a botched lobotomy, and she became a shell of her former self. She'd quietly spend the rest of her days here at St. Coletta until her death in 2005. Now, I'm friends with several former and current employees of the St. Coletta nursing home facilities, And many of them that have worked in those buildings have told me tales that will send shivers down your spine. Tales of hearing patients wailing in the empty floors where no one resided, hearing the squeaky wheels of gurneys being pushed in the underground tunnels where the deceased would be transported. Lights have been seen flashing off and on, shining bright in places that have no electricity. Coletta is truly a haunting place.
So the number 2 spot definitely goes to Summerwind in Land O'Lakes, Wisconsin. Now this place is so notorious, it's made its way to the History Channel, it has been a part of many urban legends, myths, all kinds of stuff surrounds Summerwind. Now the mansion was built, I guess, in the early 1900s, and I don't know, I guess it was doomed from the start. I guess it's almost like, I guess, you could call it Wisconsin's Amityville, except I don't think any murders actually went on there. But attempted, yes.
Sitting at the very northern part of Wisconsin is West Bay Lake, and according to the lore in this small town, is in the early 20th century, the Lamont family would purchase a plot of land and construct what would eventually become Summerwind Mansion. No one knows what happened here to cause the paranormal phenomena that plague Summerwind, but something so sinister lurks here that no family has ever lasted as long as the first inhabitants, the Lamonts. And even after fire destroyed the abandoned mansion, people still report voices coming from the property when no one's around. There's reports of lights flashing and orbs flying amongst the rubble. The Lamont family would endure 2 decades of these paranormal events before finally leaving, and it was one particular episode that would cause the abrupt departure. One evening, while the Lamonts were preparing a meal in the kitchen, they witnessed a large, dark figure emerge from the basement, and this startled them to the point Mr. Lamont pulled out his pistol and fired twice. The bullets went right through the figure and into the door. The figure vanished, and the family quickly vacated. The bullet holes could still be viewed in the door until it burned down. Many owners came and went until a large young family would purchase the home with the intentions of restoring it to its former glory. They would struggle to find any local companies to assist them with the projects, and the ones they did hire would leave before even making progress, claiming tools would be moved, blueprints would be vanishing into thin air, it seemed. The home had a dark reputation, and so the family would take the task on themselves. And this too, however, would also abruptly end due to the ghost's antics. The spirit was taking a toll on them, specifically the husband, who seemed most prone to its negative energy. He began isolating himself and residing in the basement. He would also ominously play the organ at late hours of the night, terrorizing everyone in the house. Things would escalate, and eventually the husband and wife would divorce, and the mother would take her children to stay with her parents, where she would try to move on from these horrifying events. But things seemed far from over for them. Even after all that happened, this woman's own father seemed to disregard all his daughter's warnings and purchased Summerwind with the intent of picking up where she had left off. He would soon find out just how serious things were. Rapidly, the spirit would act up, throwing and moving objects, shadows ducking around corners, and many more extreme episodes occurred. And once again, Summerwind would lie empty. And it seems this land is cursed, because one final event took place. When there was talk of restoring this mansion again, it was struck by lightning and completely burned, leaving only the rubble and negative energy behind. And I think that maybe that's nature's way of saying we shouldn't be living here anymore.
My number 1 spot, it's just a very small, quaint, quiet cemetery, and it's called Wanderer's Rest. But this is the place where a mass grave lies due to a bunch of people losing their life to the cholera epidemic that swept throughout Wisconsin during the 1850s and 1840s. Lebanon, unfortunately, was hit particularly hard by this bacterium. So one fateful summer day, it hits the town and people are literally dropping like flies. There was probably about 20-30 bodies buried in a mass grave, but for the longest time that grave remained unmarked. I had a very uncomfortable feeling the entire time I was there, and I just recently investigated again with Visually Create TV. While Justin and I were there, things were going off on our meter, but my very first visit, my meter went so crazy, and my K2 never goes off, no matter where I go. No matter if it's the most haunted place, my meter isn't gonna move, I bet. If there's nothing there, that shit ain't moving. But at Wanderer's Rest, the very first time I went there, when I brought up cholera and I started talking about, you know, the sickness, my meter was going so quick, so crazy that I could feel it vibrating in my hand, and I will share those clips with y'all. But there was just something about that place. And also, on that full moon night that I was there, it made it even more creepy. I think it just kind of supercharged the atmosphere. Like, it got intense and it felt uncomfortable. But while I was there with Justin, we heard stuff clearly call his name. It called his name clear as day. We said, can you say one of our names? And just like that, it just says Justin, but it says his last name as well. And I won't, obviously, for his, I mean, out of respect to him, if you guys know his last name, good for you. But it said his first and last name so loud and so clear that we both just like turned and looked at each other. And there was multiple times, it was as every time I asked a question, I was getting direct, specific answers. This isn't something I could just chalk up to being like, whoa, one off, like that, you know, it could have been any, no, like something was answering me. The meter was going off, my dowsing rods were losing their minds. So out of my personal experience, I have to say Wanderer's Rest is probably the most haunted place I've ever visited in all of Wisconsin and all of Illinois. Of all the places that I've traveled and I've explored, that place sticks with me. Out of all of them, definitely Wanderer's Rest. That's my 10 haunted locations for this video. I think I'm going to be running a few more because I got a lot of other places I want to talk about with y'all. But yeah, I guess that's it for now. And thank you so much. Enjoy your Halloween season. This is just the start. Spooky beginnings. I love you.